Caroline, this all actually falls onto the lap, apart from the Prime Minister, but of the new Home Affairs Minister, Home Affairs and Immigration. This is where Tony Burke, he's only been sworn into the job for a week, but he surely, if they've been hopeless for 2 years on this stuff, he's the one who needs to step up.
Well, he does, and obviously there's a much broader issue there in relation to Home Affairs and Direction 99 and the new Direction 110, which is just Direction 99 with slightly wider margins on the side of the paper it's written on. A position does actually need to be taken where the absolute number one priority is the safety of Australians. The new direction that I just noted, Chris, still essentially wants the AAT and alike to give, significant consideration to, someone who's, up for deportation, but take into significant consideration the time that they've spent here in Australia. Well, quite frankly, if you are not a citizen of this country and you commit a very serious crime, I don't really care how much time you spent here. And I think the general view across the country would be the same. The thing is when you don't take leadership on these sorts of matters, where you don't set the threshold of behaviours and say this is unacceptable, well, then people start pushing the margins, and that's what we end up with.
Exactly. I mean, the clue for Tony Burke is in the title, Home Affairs. He's supposed to look after Australian security and Australian citizens first.
Well, he's not. And interesting, just on to Caroline's last point, I read today that I believe it's Saudi and possibly UAE, but definitely Saudi, has outlawed public mourning for Hanaya. It's outlawed it. Like these countries, people don't realise in the West that these countries have kicked out Muslim Brotherhood, PIG, they've kicked out Hamas. They don't want that. They want cohesion. They're moderate Muslim countries. They are better at social cohesion and enforcing it than we are in Australia, I think, in some elements.
It's a real worry. We'll keep this conversation going in the weeks and months to come, no doubt. I want to go to another aspect of politics, though, that's much more lowbrow, much more laughable, really. They're just fiddling with your tax dollars. This is Queensland politics, the upcoming election. And so what do? What does the Premier up there, Steven Miles, do? You just throw around more taxpayers' money. You just try and buy more votes. And now it's 50 cents a trip for public transport. Here he is.
I'm on the train for the first day of 50-cent fares, and it's great to see so many people using public transport.
No, honestly, Caroline, this is the cheapest trick in politics, isn't it? I mean, this is what he's reduced to, but it'll probably win him some votes.
Well, he's at the point, and his government is at the point that it's like, do all things necessary to stem the loss of blood for October. They have absolutely no concept or care for any sort of budget responsibility whatsoever. This isn't even the most egregious of it. I think their subsidies for energy costs are much more egregious. Obviously, the aggregate amount is much more. I mean, I'd be just really interested to know how many people actually use public transport and how many people are simply by virtue of 50-cent fares going to be encouraged to use it. I think if people have got the option from working from home, they will do that because that's still 50 cents cheaper. People who take public transport are probably pretty stoked about it because it will have that everyday cost of living, that immediate impact. But ultimately, Chris, like you said, all of these things means that people, whatever additional or other money they have, will be spent elsewhere. And we know that the Queensland budget from this year adds 1.5% to Queensland aggregate demand and 0.3% to national aggregate demand.
It's just pathetic. It's embarrassing. It's wasteful. And honestly, you mentioned the power subsidies. Gemma, there's up to $1,000 here. They're just throwing money around. This is what state politics is reduced to try and buy votes and not worry about how much bigger they're making government, how much deeper their deficits are going to be. I just wish that people would punt them for trying this nonsense.
I mean, desperation reeks, doesn't it? Like, it is actually the stuff of desperate university politics, that cringeworthy little video on Instagram. Like, It's not leadership. I don't know where the leadership is in this country, although I did note that Chris Minns today said all public sector workers are back in the office, that's it, no more working from home, and I say bravo
that's
for
great,
that.
yeah.
Different issue, obviously, but at least leadership, right?
Yeah,
Good
he
on
wants
him.
more people on public transport. We'll tell them to turn up at work.
Correct, but not only that, and that picture, I mean, I've seen busier trains in Perth. Love you, Perth, but Perth is not known for its love of public transport. It is an absolute dearth, a dearth of leadership. And it, like I said, desperation reeks.
But just on the power subsidy argument, some good data out today showing how in France and other countries with nuclear power, guess what? Their power's cheaper than ours.
What a shocking plot twist. And for everyone watching tonight and those who will watch later, I got my power bill last week. I'm not going to lie. There were swear words that were unladylike that came out of my mouth.
You haven't been charging your Tesla?
I haven't been charging that Tesla at home. There's an update where that's concerned at some point. But I mean, genuinely, I remember I'd actually said to you, Cara, didn't I? I called you a couple of days later and I was like, I don't have children to feed and clothe and send to school. And I opened that power bill and got a pretty bloody big shock. And I have been travelling a lot, so I haven't even been home to use the heater and things like that. This government has promised one thing, delivered another, but what's worse, it has stifled and refuses to adopt policies that will bring genuine market-driven price relief to households.
Honestly, on the weekend, they were saying they were going to solve Indigenous disadvantage with renewable energy.
I mean, that's
honestly, these people are just zealots when it comes to renewables.
Absolutely.
It does my head in. I need to get your thoughts, though, Caro, as host of the Royal Report, because I've been told that the sort of quasi-former neo-royal Meghan Markle has given us all a bit of life advice. She's given another interview and she's telling us how we can heal or something. Have a listen.
When you've been through any level of pain or trauma, I believe part of our healing journey, certainly part of mine, is being able to be really open about it.
Wow, what a pity she's never going to be Queen, Caroline. Could you tell us what that means and what she's on about now?
No idea, but Samara Gill, who was the commentator on my show last night, called it psychobabble, which I think is probably about the best way to put it. You want to do what you do publicly, that's absolutely fine. That means it's more likely to be the subject of criticism. But that whole interview centred around social media, protecting children, online bullying and all those sorts of things. And I guess, you know, but people in those sorts of positions, they can advocate very effectively on certain issues, particularly where there's authenticity, right, Chris? But when you have spent how much time rinsing your family in public to make a buck out of it, it really, really affects your credibility, shoots it down, in fact.
She might have a tad of hypocrisy there, does Meghan Markle. Thanks.
She's got great hair, though.
Great hair, indeed. I won't comment on her appearance whatsoever. Thanks for joining us, Caroline and Gemma.